Today on Inside Utah Politics, Utah Democrats make an unusual move and vote not to nominate a candidate for U.S. Senate. The person hoping to represent the party in November is here to discuss how it all went down. Plus, the Biden administration working to make a COVID antiviral pill more accessible to Americans. How they plan to get it done.
Time now for Inside Utah Politics.
Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Glenn Mills. It is time to go inside Utah politics. We do begin this morning with Kel Weston, former Democratic candidate for U.S. Senate. Kel, great to have you on the show. Thanks so much for making time for us.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so just to recap real quick, at convention you were hoping to walk away as the nominee for U.S. Senate for the Democratic Party. That did not happen. Instead, they are putting their support behind a coalition for independent candidate Evan McMullin. Your thoughts right after all that played out?
You know, I think it was an important case to make. 2 years ago, there were 500,000 of our Utah neighbors who voted for a Democrat, and I think they're increasingly engaging on what this decision may mean for them. So rather than, I think, not have this conversation in our party, I think it was very important that we did have this conversation. Of course, I wish the vote had gone differently. I accept the vote. I'm now focused on helping a lot of good Democrats down ballot make their case.
Okay, let's get into that a little bit more, but first I would like to talk about your interest in running. Why did you step up and run for the Democratic nomination for Senate?
Well, I'm proud to be a Utah Democrat. I believe Utah needs a healthy political marketplace. We're the fastest growing state in the country, and I believe in order to have politics that match a lot of the issues that are important to voters, whether that's health care, climate change, the water situation we've got in our state. We need candidates who are going to take those issues all across our state. And I was hoping to be able to be part of that conversation, because when Democrats aren't in the room, I think the people who lose the most are the people who have the least cushion in their lives when government fails. And these are the people I talk about that are at the bus stop and they're not going to the ski resort to pay $150 for a ski pass. They're going to their second or third job. So that's, I think, what's going to be missing in the conversation, at least at the Senate level. I am looking forward to having other candidates on the ballot who are Democrats.
Let's talk a little bit more about convention and how all of that went down. I know there were a lot of backroom discussions between your team and the coalition team. I'm sure you're not going to want to get into all of that, but what are some things you can tell us about maybe what we didn't see going on behind closed doors?
You know, it was a politically packed room. I'll say that, you know, politics can sometimes be a tough business, and I think that we had a great team. We had a lot of supporters who drove in from Kane County and Iron County and, you know, up north in Cache Valley. And so I think it was a time where Democrats understood how important a high school auditorium in Cottonwood was going to be, not just for active Democrats, but for our party. So the crossroads was there. The party delegates, 782, decided that day. Again, I accept that decision, but I believe the net effect is going to be that there may be more disenfranchised, disillusioned voters out there.
Yeah, I want to talk to you about that, because that was one of the big issues that was brought up at convention. Those who are disenfranchised, will they be energized to support Democrats in the election?
We are a divided party, but I want to be part of bridging that divide. And I think that how we do that is to show them that if they don't vote or if they stay home, politics doesn't stay out of your business. It's going to affect you. But I think this is important to remember. It's following the gerrymander. So when our supermajority state legislature, particularly for the congressional seats, severely divided Salt Lake County, I think that is the context that I was trying to push back, that even with the gerrymander, we're going to give people choices on the ballot.
The race that you were in for U.S. Senate, obviously a statewide race, you know that. That has nothing to do with gerrymandering, and that's an area where Democrats have struggled for decades now. You have to go back quite a ways to find a statewide Democrat winner in the state of Utah. What is the dynamic there? What does the party need to do to try to close that gap?
I believe we need to be proud Democrats. I do not believe we should try and reinvent ourselves as Republican light. I think that we stand for poor kids. If you look at legislation last year, the child tax credit, up to 40% of the poorest kids in our country, including a lot of poor kids in Utah, were brought out of poverty. To me, that's not only the right kind of thing to do, it's a good message to take, whether you're in San Juan County or up in Tooele County. We believe in healthcare affordability and access. The Affordable Care Act brought 40 million Americans to better health. It also saved a lot of families from bankruptcy. 14.5 million Americans signed up for the ACA this year. Those are good messages. Those are important messages. We could get to public lands. I was the only candidate who clearly and consistently said the federal government had a big role to play in protecting these amazing public lands we have in Utah. So I guess there are two visions going forward, and my vision is I'm a proud Utah Democrat. We're the fastest growing state in the country, and we should make our case publicly, openly, regularly, and not try and change our messaging. We should just find the messages that work and take them forward.
That was kind of the crux of your situation, though, Cal, is those in the coalition to back Evan McMullen were saying, look, what we're doing isn't working. We need to try something new. Your thoughts on that?
Well, trying something new, I think, is an argument, but the people who are not in that room were the 500,000 people in Utah who 2 years ago, it seems, liked what Democrats brought to the table. I tend to believe that we should trust voters in elections. I always said in the 4 months I was on the campaign trail seeking the official nomination that we should trust voters. And instead, what's come out of this process is basically a decision to say we have decided for you. And we're the Utah Democratic Party, so I believe that the root word of our party is democracy, and I trust voters to make those decisions for themselves. But I'm not looking to cause more of a divide. I am looking, though, to try and make sure that we don't forget who we stand up for. And who we stand up for are the people who are going to pay the biggest price if we don't get better policies in Washington.
So let's get back to this down ticket idea that we have discussed. You mentioned the presidential vote. We all know that a presidential race does draw more people to the polls, but there was a shockingly high number of people who voted for President Biden in the state of Utah and then didn't fill out the rest of the ballot. What's the disconnect there?
Unfortunately, I think.
And more importantly, how's it going to play out in this very situation?
Yeah, the drop off was real, and we had candidates, I think, especially at the county level here in Salt Lake, that likely would have been reelected or elected. I think that's one of the risks of not having a Democrat at the top of the ballot. So I've had a lot of people reach out to me, I would say more than a few, who are very concerned, whether they're candidates on the ballot right now or just people who believe that their voice and their vote was taken away from them. So the data does show that if there is not a candidate running at the top of the ballot, there is an effect down ballot. And what I'll be spending my time going forward doing is supporting great candidates like Davina Smith in southeastern Utah, Lynette Wendell, Ashley Matthews, Patrick Belmont, who's a water expert up in Cache Valley, Nick Mitchell, Darlene McDonald. We have an amazing cast of Democrats who are going to continue to move forward and make the case. And I just hope that Utahns understand that the only way we get to a healthy political marketplace in Utah is if we give people choices. And the data point, Glenn, that I'm most concerned about is I've been told that 40% of the ballot this year is uncontested. I want to say that again. 40% of the ballot does not have a choice other than one candidate in a certain race on it. And that's when democracy really starts to fail.
All right, Kel, we have run out of time, but I really appreciate you being here and having you back on the show. Not your first time, but very good conversation. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Coming up, more on the move by Utah Democrats to back the independent candidate for the race for Senate. Our panel will weigh in a little later. But first, a military housing company in the hot seat in the nation's capital. The accusations coming from lawmakers after the break. The Biden administration wants to get Paxlovid, the COVID antiviral pill, into the hands of more Americans. Washington correspondent Basil John reports that while the funding is secured for the first order, additional funding from Congress may be needed.
Tuesday, White House COVID response coordinator Dr. Ashish Jha detailed the latest effort to expand access to the COVID antiviral pill.
Paxlovid is a really important step in our ability to fight this pandemic.
The Biden administration says it will work with Pfizer to accelerate the production and distribution of Paxlovid to pharmacies across the country.
It has an enormously beneficial impact, reduces hospitalizations by more than 90%.
The free antiviral drugs will be available at more than 30,000 locations. The administration believes greater availability will boost awareness and use.
A lot more people are eligible and would benefit than I think people think.
But while the administration has the funding for the first order, they may need more money from Congress to purchase more.
Given our federal budget, it's a small amount to ask that we provide money for these therapeutics.
Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer says additional COVID funding is a necessity in the U.S. to prevent Americans from going back into lockdown.
Senate Republicans should work with us to quickly pass another round of COVID funding. It's not more complicated than that.
But Republicans, like Louisiana Senator John Kennedy and Indiana Senator Mike Braun, aren't sure the funding is needed.
What's the administration going to spend it on?
There's so much money sloshing around in the federal government right now that if you look carefully, we need to be repurposing.
Without the funding, the administration warns the U.S. will fall behind not just with the pills, but other COVID treatments. Reporting in Washington, I'm Basil John.
Hazardous living conditions in military homes are now the focus of a Senate investigation. Lawmakers spending months looking into reports of safety concerns. Washington correspondent Hannah Brandt explains what they discovered.
Captain Samuel Cho used to live on Georgia's Fort Gordon Army Base. When his daughter developed this painful skin condition, he says their doctor blamed mold in their home.
My daughter's experience is life-altering, and that it will haunt her as well as us for the rest of our lives.
Senators John Ossoff and Ron Johnson launched an 8-month investigation into stories like Captain Cho's.
These men and women should expect to live in conditions that will not damage the health and safety of themselves and their family.
They say they found a pattern of things like mold, asbestos, and water leaks in military homes managed by the company Balfour Beatty, a company that already pled guilty to defrauding the government for housing repairs between 2013 and 2019.
But it is not just the government that suffered in this case, it's the service members and it's their families. They're the ones being forgotten, pushed aside, and made sick by a company that continues to choose profits over people.
After hearing from families, lawmakers turned their attention to Balfour Beatty officials.
Why should we believe, Mr. Taylor, that a company that engaged in major fraud against the United States is fixing this?
Do our people make mistakes? Yes, they make mistakes. There's human error in every business.
Balfour Beatty argues there have only been a handful of problems among the tens of thousands of military homes it manages.
We understand where our shortcomings are, and we take action.
Military families say that's not true and are demanding change.
Military families make sacrifices every day. A safe home should not be one of them.
The path to justice starts with getting the facts, and that's what we've done for the last 8 months.
In Washington, I'm Hannah Brandt.
Still to come, the move by Utah Democrats to back the independent candidate in the race for Senate. Our panel debates after the break. Time now for a closer look at some of the big stories of the week with the Inside Utah Politics panel. This week we have House Minority Leader Brian King and former Speaker of the House Greg Hughes. Gentlemen, good to have you on the show. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Ben. Good to be here.
Let's start off with the race for Senate. Brian, you were at the state convention for the Democrats. You saw it happen firsthand, bypassing nominating a Democratic candidate for Senate, going instead in favor of independent Evan McMullin. Your thoughts on that?
Well-qualified Democratic candidate, too. Cale Weston has a great resume. He's a good guy, remarkable guy. He ran for Congress in 2020. This was a gut-wrenching decision, I think, for myself as a delegate and for most of the delegates there. And I think it's a measure of the extent to which there is alarm and real concern about sending Mike Lee back to Congress again in light of his clear behavior, undermining the Constitution, seeking to set aside the results of a free and fair election that we had in 2020. And when we saw that he was working so hard to do anything that he could to support Donald Trump and ignore the constitutional requirements, ignore his oath of office, and ignore the results of the elections, I think there are many, many Democrats who say, we've got to do what's necessary to get this guy out of office. And there was a feeling, a calculation, based on polling, based on a lot of information, that Evan McMullin was the guy who was in a much better position to do that than Cale, despite Cale's good qualifications as a candidate.
Greg, let's bring you in real quick. First, weigh in on what the representative said about the senator and his efforts that we saw through the text messages and the connection to former President Trump.
It's a nothing burger. I'm going to tell you there was chaos after the election. There were concerns about what had happened, how that election occurred, how it rolled out. The text messages reflect that concern, looking into issues. The senator voted to confirm the Electoral College vote. It's all consistent with what he shared, but he was concerned, and he was looking at the constitutional routes and making sure that everything was done correctly. I think if you want to try to beat him, that's the only thing I can think of that you can make something out of that, but there's nothing there.
Let's dig a little deeper into actually what took place at the convention, Representative. You said you voted to nominate Cale Weston. That didn't happen. What does that say about the state of the Democratic Party right now that they are putting their weight behind an independent and bypassing their own candidate?
Well, that's why it was a tough vote. I really wrung my hand about that, and I didn't publicly come out one way or the other. I personally voted in favor of keeping Cale as our candidate. But listen, that was because I think that, quite honestly, even though the polling showed that Evan McMullin has an excellent shot at dislodging Mike Lee, it's so hard to dislodge an incumbent. I think that in the end, it's less likely that he's going to win than Mike Lee's going to win, and so I thought this is too big a gamble to make me feel comfortable. Because I think when you bypass a good quality candidate like Cale, unless you're certain that by joining forces with independents and more pragmatic or more independent Republicans to get rid of someone as loathsome as Mike Lee in terms of an elected official in the Senate, unless you are really confident you're going to be able to do it, you're doing more damage to the party, and that's what I was concerned about. And I am concerned that, in fact, this move signals too clearly to the people of the state of Utah the weakness of Utah's Democratic Party. But it's not like people know right now that, it's not like people think right now that Democrats can win a statewide office. I mean, it's been over 2 decades since a Democrat has won a statewide office.
You have to go back to the 90s for that. I want to dig a little deeper into that in a minute, but first, Greg, your thoughts on what this says about the state of the Democratic Party?
Oh, well, I think Brian was, he's honest about it, but let's just say that Democrats are unelectable. They know it. Statewide, there's no way that party platform, what the Democrats are doing nationally in the state, they know clearly that people will not vote for a Democrat. And so they're trying to glob onto a candidate that they think has a chance in a coming election. But again, let's not forget what that means. That means in the mid and long view, there are people in Utah who believe that they're Democrats. They like and subscribe to their Democrat platform. They have no candidate. They literally kicked the candidate off the ballot. It wasn't like it was unfilled and they needed to find someone to get behind. They removed their Democrat nominee for the Senate off of the ballot so that they could support someone else. And I think there's a lot you can read into that, and that is that Democrats are not electable. And that's, look, I'm not a Democrat. I don't even subscribe to that platform, but I believe in a team. I believe it's a two-party rule in terms of two parties that are major parties in our governance model. How in the world I could do a better job being a Democrat party chair than what they're doing right now to that party?
Representative, I want to ask you this. What impact
I got to respond to that, Glenn.
Okay, go ahead.
It is absolutely untrue to say Democrats are unelectable. What you've got here is
statewide right now?
Well, what you've got here is we would not, just because we haven't won a statewide election in over 2 decades doesn't mean we wouldn't have put up a good, strong candidate like Cale Weston for a statewide office. We did it in 2020 with Chris Peterson. Great candidate for governor. What we have here is a convergence of circumstances that makes not just Democrats, but many, many people feel strongly in this state. We've got to do what's necessary to knock Mike Lee out because he is literally a threat to our Constitution and to our governing system. And we are taking desperate measures to make sure that we do everything we can to have that happen.
I want to hit on one point, though, with you, Representative. What impact is this going to have down ballot? Because that was a big concern within the Democratic Party. The vote at convention, I believe, was 57-43. So you have a pretty sizable amount of Democrats who are not behind this move. Are they going to be energized in November?
Yeah, it's a great question. It was one of the main concerns I had, Glenn. And I think that one of the things that I'm most grateful for, Cale Weston is a first-rate, classy person. He immediately after this vote said, look, this isn't the vote that I wanted. It isn't what I was hoping would happen. But I'm voting for and supporting Democrats. And I'm voting for getting rid of Mike Lee out of the U.S. Senate. So the fact that Cale has come together so quickly and in such a genuine, authentic way to say, let's work together, both as supporting of Democrats and as getting Mike Lee out of office to make these things come to pass in this coming election. I think that helps a great deal to heal the wounds within the Democratic Party.
Greg, here's what I want to get out of you real quick.
Yeah.
When you take a look at Democrats getting behind Evan McMullin, who prior to moving independent was a Republican, a lot of his views that he talks about on this show are considered conservative. So are Democrats, when they get to know him, really going to get behind him?
Well, I don't think they'd support him or kick their candidate off the ballot if they didn't think he was Democrat enough. But I think it's the worst built Trojan horse you've ever seen. I mean, it's got slats inside. You see every Democrat inside this Trojan horse that's called Evan McMullin. He's a Democrat candidate, and he's the one they think that if they don't call him a Democrat, he might be able to win. The sad part here is that the Democrat Party in Utah is really just now become a regional party. It's strong in Salt Lake City, it's strong in Park City, Moab, but they're giving up. They're giving up, and that down ballot question you asked is absolutely relevant. You have Democrats that want to be able to get behind good candidates, and it might not be for this election cycle, but how do you build and have a strong two-party system in this state if you're kicking your own candidates off your ballot? So I think Evan McMullin is attractive to Democrats because he's appealing to Democrats. But that doesn't make it right. It doesn't make the Democrat Party strong. And I'm a Republican that doesn't think that everyone should just crowd into the Republican Party and pretend they're just one party. I think we do well to have a two-party state or two-party
representative
governance. So,
Representative,
Glenn,
when we take a look at the statewide performance by Democrats over the last few decades, they have struggled. You mentioned Chris Peterson, who was widely seen as a solid candidate, but still only getting anywhere from upper 20 into the 30% statewide. So what does the party have to do to reach more Utahns and gain more support?
Well, we have to do a better job of putting good messaging together. We have to continue to put up good candidates. And in this situation involving Evan McMullin and Cale Weston, I think that my friend Greg Hughes protesteth too much. I think what we see is some concern and nervousness on the part of Republicans across the state that Evan McMullin may very well present a credible threat in terms of getting more votes than Mike Lee when November comes around. Rest assured, Greg is not concerned first and foremost about the health of Utah's Democratic Party.
I do like a two-party system. I do.
Let's talk about that a little bit more, though, because right now polling indicates that Senator Lee is very strong within the party. That obviously bodes well for him in a primary scenario, but it does show some potential vulnerability with the statewide electorate. So, Greg, how do you see that general matchup playing out?
Look, just if you took the craziness going on in this country and in our state and put that aside, forget the 11% inflation, forget $4 gasoline per gallon, forget about not having a southern border, forget our military in Afghanistan and all the disasters happening and the unrest. Off your elections, if one party wins the White House, then the midterm election goes the other way. It's just historical. So inherently, you would see Republicans do very well in a midterm when the Democrats win the White House. Now add all the things I just described, and you're going to see a very large swing, I believe, the Republicans' way. So I think that bodes very well for the senator. I think Senator Lee leads that kind of sentiment, conservative approach to governance and even common sense at this point, governance that will do very well in the state.
Representative, wrap us up real quick.
Well, I just think that what you're going to see is some more information coming out about January 6th that may very well make Mike Lee look worse than he looks right now. So I think we're going to see a close race. I'm keeping my fingers crossed that Evan McMullin can knock out Mike Lee. And if it isn't Evan McMullin, that it's Becky Edwards or Allie Isom in the primary in June. I'd love to see that.
All right.
I don't care so much as I want to see Mike Lee out of office.
Going to have to wrap it up on that note. Gentlemen, thanks so much. We got through one whole topic
issue
today.
Big one, though.
Big one.
Hey, are you on Twitter again yet, Greg, so I can tag you on this?
Nah, now that Elon's running things, I might get on there again. You know, now that free speech is
All right,
alive.
gentlemen. Thanks for being here. Stay with us. We'll be right back with more Inside Utah Politics right after the break. We leave you now with a look at what's on the radar in the world of politics. The primary election is coming up next month. Mail-in ballots will start to go out the week of June 7th, and Election Day is Tuesday, June 28th. Make sure to connect with me via email and social media. I'd like to know what you think of this show and other issues that are important to you. You can email me at InsideUtahPolitics@abc4.com. You can also follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Thanks so much for making us part of your Sunday morning. We hope to see you again next week as we go inside Utah politics.